Jessica Jones, Shane Ryback. He's another beneficiary of Dr. Malus's work. He has the power to heal. He healed Inez.
Nice to meet you.
Really? How long were you at the clinic?
Welcome back everyone, and let's talk some Jessica Jones Season 2. So, on this video, I'm not planning on doing the usual. I'm not gonna do all those Easter eggs from the comics and Easter eggs from other TV series on Netflix, but instead, this is gonna be a plain review. Nothing more, nothing less. The only references I'm gonna be using on this video are the ones that kind of advance the storytelling on Jessica Jones Season 2, or the ones that kind of locate its events on the larger Marvel Cinematic Universe timeline. But because this is a 13-episode season, and because there is no time in the world to review it over the course of one video, I'm gonna focus the big things, and I'm gonna get started right away so we don't waste any more time. So let's go. Now to get started, since the dawn of Marvel Netflix TV series. Hold on, I'm sorry, Marvel TV series on Netflix, cause the first one kinda irritates some people. But anyway, since the dawn of Marvel TV series on Netflix, we've been asking ourselves this one major question. Where or when do all of these events within these series happen on the bigger Marvel Cinematic Universe timeline? Now with each and every one of these series, with each and every one of their seasons, we were like, alright, we're still right after the Chitauri invasion, or sometime after the Chitauri invasion, but not before the events of, say, Captain America Civil War. But with the arrival of Jessica Jones Season 2, we've got a general idea as to when or where all of these events kind of occur on the general timeline of the MCU. So pretty much we've got three core references over the course of the season. The first one is to Captain America losing his shield, but I thought that was just a subtle Easter egg to the movies and does not necessarily indicate where the events happen on the timeline. Simply put, Vito's action figure of Captain America losing his shield does not necessarily mean that he's talking we are on this part of the timeline. However though, there were like two more references. The fact that Jessica Jones is known, her powers are known, everyone knows about it, while they were actually trying to hide all of that during the Defenders Season 1, does necessarily mean that all of these people have ended up being registered. Now combine that with Detective Costa's statement, "You're one of the good ones, Jessica," which basically felt like it was a reference to a bigger known population of powered people. But finally there was the one that tipped the balance in favor of all of these events happening post-Captain America Civil War, that Jessica Jones and all those other superpowered individuals are probably registered under the Sokovia Accords. The mention, or shall I call it the repeated mention, of the raft close to the end of the season kind of indicated that much, kind of told us that much. So just in case you forgot where you heard that name, the raft is that underwater prison that we got to see on Captain America Civil War. And you now probably remember that this prison was intended for the detaining of all those superpowered individuals that did not sign the Sokovia Accords. And based on the events of Jessica Jones Season 2, I'm assuming as well that it is supposed to incarcerate all those superpowered individuals who act like criminals, whether they sign the Sokovia Accords or they don't. But anyway, speaking of the events of the season, we were never given any real antagonists, any clear-cut, obvious kind of antagonists. So we were given Alisa Jones and we were given Karl Malus, but none of them did feel like one of those villains that you get to see over the course of an entire season of any comic book series. Now while some people did feel disappointed because of that, while some people did feel like the season did have no point, that it did not present any compelling villains, I think this season did one hell of a job. Let it be known though that I'm not saying that this season was not flawed at all, because this season had some major flaws, but nonetheless, the season did a good job overall. Not a great job, it wasn't really Jessica Jones Season 1, but nonetheless, it did a very good job. Now being someone who just finished viewing Jessica Jones Season 2, I had to figure out first, and before evaluating anything about the season, what the objective of the season was. So we just established the objective of the season was not presenting us with a major villain, one of those big bad villains, not the Hand, not Killgrave, nothing of that sort, but instead I think it was about presenting us with the villain within. So while the season did present us with Alisa Jones, and while it did present us with Karl Malus for example, both of them were fighting their own villains, they were fighting those demons of their own. Now the same thing does apply to both Trish Walker and Jessica Jones. So Trish Walker has been fighting her demons, her hatred of her sister or her best friend having powers, her need to have powers of her own, her willingness to go to any limit in order to get those powers. But at the very end of the season, she does come to realize she no more wants that. She is sober, she is clean, she is no more pursuing all those powers that she wanted in the first place. Even though moments later she does realize that she's got powers, which was an amazing scene at the very end, by the way. You know, the birth of Hellcat, a very good teaser for whatever it is to come on future seasons. But as I did mention moments ago, the same does apply to Jessica, because you need to look at her at the very beginning of the season and you need to check her out at the very end. So at the very beginning of the season, she's hating what she keeps referring to as that superhero shit that keeps popping up. She is as well that very distant, one-night stand kind of person. She has that fear of being a killer, and Trish happens to be her dearest. But after her entire experience throughout the season, Killgrave, for example, has no more control over her. Killgrave has got no sway over her. That guy's got nothing on Jessica Jones. He is no more engraved in her head. He is no more one of her biggest fears. She no more fears that superhero shit. She no more hates it, and she's embracing it, evident in her conversation with Vito at the dinner table on the very final scene of the season. She is willing to talk superhero shit and the superhero shit she has had to do throughout her day. Her fear of relationships, her fear of getting into anything, her one-night stand persona is gone, and she's got something with Oscar. Even though that thing with Oscar is kind of paving the way towards something that I'm assuming she's gonna have with Luke Cage. And I'm not basing this just on the comics, but on that scene at the very end of The Defenders. But finally though, by the end of the season, all those fears of Jessica Jones have been resolved. Her fear of Killgrave, her fear of being a killer, all of them are gone, and her reliance and her relationship with Trish has been broken. And yes, it is kind of sad, but at the same time, it does prove that she's now willing to move on, that she's now willing to have other people in her life, which is once again evident by her relationship with both Oscar and Vito. But even Jeri Hogarth, who's never gotten that much personal screen time over the course of any of the 4 series, has gotten enough time on this one to face her own demons and her own fears. So to sum up all of this so far, this season was a growth arc for all of Jeri, Malcolm, Trish, and Jessica herself. But alright, let's speak of something else. Let's speak of the pacing of Jessica Jones Season 2. So there were moments throughout Season 2 where I really loved the pacing, and there were other moments where I really hated the pacing. With all of these Netflix series, I do usually love it slow, like really slow, but not this slow. The first couple of episodes of the season were extremely slow paced, and it was annoying at times. But then the third episode kinda started picking up. The fourth went back to a certain level of slow that is kind of acceptable but not really acceptable, but then fifth episode going forward, it was kind of perfect for me. But throughout the first and second episode and the final episode, there was this one thing that kept giving me company and kept making me feel okay about the speed at which the events were going. That was pretty much that Sin City vibe that those episodes had to their name. So the narration of Jessica Jones, along with the music, kind of felt very Sin City, the first movie of course, cause I'm not a fan of the second. But to be precise, it kind of reminded me of all those Mickey Rourke, Marv narrations over the course of the first Sin City movie. But anyway, another flaw of the season is that a lot of characters were kind of used as mere plot devices. So you've got the return of Will Simpson. Now his return was unnecessary. His return was kind of meaningless. The only objective from his return was for Trish Walker to get her hands on that inhaler. So pretty much all of that was to basically advance the Hellcat storyline. Now one of the more interesting things on this season, because it was kind of exciting and kind of disappointing at the same time, was the way Karl Malus was introduced, or the character that Karl Malus had on the season. So pretty much Karl Malus in the comics is much bigger. He is a real villain. But on the series, he was kind of portrayed as a villain you kind of end up sympathizing with. So in a way, he is criminal, he did all this to all these people, but at the very end of the day, he's in love with Alisa, and he did it to save these people. And he did try as well to control Alisa's tendencies. He didn't want her to wreak havoc all over the place. He did not want her to cause all this damage. So in one way, Karl Malus was good and you could sympathize with him, but in another way, he was more like the comics, an evil person, but not as evil as the comics. Now, I believe that my disappointment with the character of Karl Malus on the series stems from the fact that he was presented way smaller than he is in the comics. So over there, he's as intelligent, he's as much of a mad scientist, and he is as well very interested and very fascinated with superhuman abilities. And nonetheless, he had a way bigger story, and he does end up ingested by the Carnage symbiote. So in the comics, Karl Malus does end up with his own set of powers at some point. So I'm guessing what I first felt over here, or what I first thought over here when I heard Malcolm say the name Karl Malus for the very first time was, okay, we're getting one hell of a villain, this is gonna be extremely exciting. But then he turned out to be just a minor sort of villain. But speaking of the character of Alisa Jones, I did love everything about that character, from the portrayal to the writing for it. And the writing for it was really amazing. She did happen as well to be one of those sympathetic villains, and I love me some sympathetic villains. And from the very beginning to the very end of the season, or from the very first moment that we got to meet her until the very end of the season, she was an extremely interesting character, and she had this struggle that she kept dealing with, and the actress did portray that kind of struggle extremely well. But to be honest, that portrayal and that writing for Alisa Jones kind of made up for the lack of it for Karl Malus, because in the comics, Alisa Jones is just Jessica's adoptive mother. And over there, she's just a normal person. She doesn't have the abilities, she doesn't have the reflexes, she doesn't have the superhuman strength. And all of these are instead powers of Karl Malus once ingested by the symbiote. So what they did over here is they took Karl Malus and made him part of what he is in the comics, but not the whole thing. Instead, they got Alisa Jones and they made her into something bigger. They made her into part Alisa Jones from the comics, part Jessica Jones' real mother, and part Karl Malus from the comics. But to sum it all up, if I were to rate this season, I'd give it a solid 7.5 to 8 out of 10. On average, I'd give the acting a solid 9 out of 10, with Kristen Ritter getting a solid 10 out of 10. For writing and storytelling, I'd say this season should be around 7 to 7.5 out of 10, and for the overall pacing of the events of the entirety of the second season, I'd give it an average of 8 to 8.5 out of 10. That being said though, let me know in the comments what you thought of the second season of Jessica Jones. Let me know if you liked it, let me know if you had any disappointments watching it, and let me know if you think it could have been done better. Let me know as well if you did like this video by dropping it a much appreciated like, and if that were to be the case, remember it is also much appreciated if you subscribe and enable notifications for my future videos. Until I see you next time though, thank you all for tuning in, and have a great day.